Imagine a family torn apart by love, neglect, and unspoken words, where every glance, every silence, and every decision cuts deeper than the last. For Cody Brown and his wives, it's been a journey filled with betrayal, regret, and heartbreaking loss. What happens when the father of the family, the one who was supposed to be the glue, becomes the one who breaks everything apart? As the years go on, Cody's relationships with his children and wives have become more strained, with growing emotional distance that no one knows how to fix. But everything changes when tragedy strikes, leaving Cody with a heavy heart, endless regret, and a fractured family that might never heal. The loss of his son, Garrison, sends shock waves through the entire Brown family, but it's not just the pain of losing him that lingers. It's the crushing weight of a relationship that was never given the chance to blossom. Could it be too late to rebuild what was broken? In this video, we'll dive into the heart of the Brown family's turmoil, exploring the emotional struggles, the painful regrets, and the long road toward potential reconciliation. Get ready, because this story isn't just about a family. It's about how we all deal with the consequences of neglect, loss, and the desperate need for connection. Cody Brown's parenting and relationship choices have long been at the center of the Brown family's drama, but it wasn't until the pandemic that the cracks truly started to show. For years, fans of Sister Wives have watched as Cody's bond with his children, especially those from his first 3 marriages, seemed to take a back seat to his relationship with Robin, his 4th wife. The favoritism Cody displayed toward Robin's children, particularly her biological kids, became more glaring as time went on, and the pandemic only made this divide sharper. When the world shut down in the 2020, Cody's household, already a complicated web of personalities and emotional baggage, was thrust into even more turmoil. Cody's decision to prioritize Robin and her kids during this time, keeping them in a bubble of safety while limiting contact with his other wives and children, sparked outrage. It wasn't just about COVID protocols, it was the emotional neglect that followed. Cody's own biological children, especially those from his previous marriages, began to feel left out, neglected, and increasingly alienated. This sense of being secondary in their father's eyes was a deep wound that, unfortunately, never really healed. It wasn't just the pandemic that highlighted these issues. It was Cody's overall approach to parenting. He often seemed to prioritize Robin's needs and her children's well-being above everyone else's. This led to obvious divisions within the family. The emotional neglect his other children felt was hard to ignore, especially as the rift between Cody and his older kids grew. His relationships with his sons and daughters from his first 3 marriages started to deteriorate, and instead of trying to repair them, Cody seemed to distance himself even more. The emotional neglect wasn't just an unfortunate byproduct of his relationship choices. It was a deliberate, though perhaps unconscious, outcome of his prioritization of Robin and her children. And this breakdown wasn't confined to his relationship with his children. His wives, too, started to feel the strain. Christine and Janelle, 2 of his older wives, began to feel like they were no longer a priority in Cody's life. Christine's decision to leave Cody was a direct result of this emotional neglect, while Janelle's journey toward independence, possibly even contemplating leaving Cody for good, was fueled by the same sense of feeling secondary, not just to Robin, but to Cody himself. This divide, born from Cody's choices, set the stage for an emotional unraveling that would have long-lasting consequences. The fallout from Cody's neglect wasn't just inevitable, it was tragic. When Cody Brown lost his son Garrison, the pain and regret that followed seemed to hit him harder than anything else he'd experienced. Garrison's death wasn't just a devastating blow to the family. It was a harsh reminder of all the missed moments, the unspoken words, and the deep emotional divides that had been left unchecked for far too long. Cody's relationship with Garrison, like many of his other relationships, had been strained for years, and his son's passing forced him to confront the gravity of those failures. The guilt Cody carried was palpable, and it became clear that he felt a profound sense of loss, not just from the tragedy of losing Garrison, but from the lost time and emotional distance between them. For much of the series, Cody's connection with his older children had been fraught with tension. His children from his earlier marriages, especially Garrison, had always seemed to fall by the wayside as Kody's focus shifted toward Robin and her kids. While he had been more involved with his younger children, those older kids were left to deal with the fallout of years of emotional neglect. Garrison, in particular, had been vocal about feeling disconnected from his father, and it wasn't until his tragic death that Kody seemed to fully understand just how far the emotional gap had grown between them. The regret Kody expressed was raw and painful. He spoke about feeling like he had failed as a father, and how he wished he could have done more to be present in Garrison's life. But even in the wake of such a deep loss, the emotional barriers between Kody and his children felt insurmountable. In the aftermath of Garrison's death, Kody tried to make amends. He attempted to reconnect with his older children, expressing his sorrow and regret over the time they had lost. But what became increasingly clear was that the damage had already been done. His children, particularly those who had been most affected by his emotional neglect, seemed distant, unsure of whether they could ever rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Kody's attempts at reconciliation felt almost like too little, too late. There was an undeniable tension in these conversations, a sense that no matter how much Kody tried to explain his regret or express his sorrow, the emotional distance between them had grown so wide that it was hard to bridge. It was heartbreaking to watch Kody struggle with his guilt, knowing full well that the love he had for his children had always been there, but it was often hidden behind poor decisions, misguided priorities, and a lack of emotional availability. As much as he tried to repair the broken bonds, there was an unspoken truth that lingered. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. The regret was real, but it wasn't enough to erase the years of emotional neglect and strained relationships. Kody was left to reckon with the consequences of his choices, and the reality that, in many ways, it was already too late to make things right. Mary's journey has been one of emotional neglect and mistreatment by Kody, a dynamic that seemed to go on for far too long. As Kody's first wife, Mary had always been in the shadows of his other relationships. From the very beginning, it was clear that her bond with Kody wasn't as emotionally fulfilling as it could have been. Over the years, especially after he married Robin, Kody's focus became increasingly centered on his younger children and his fourth wife, leaving Mary to deal with her own insecurities and emotional baggage. For much of the series, Mary's self-worth seemed tied to her relationship with Kody, and it was evident that he didn't treat her with the love or respect she deserved. The emotional neglect was heartbreaking to watch, especially when Kody made it clear that he wasn't invested in her emotionally or intimately. This neglect created a toxic environment where Mary was left questioning her place within the family, and more importantly, her own sense of identity. However, after Mary and Kody's separation, something remarkable started to happen. Mary's journey toward independence and self-discovery began to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. Once freed from the emotional chains of her marriage to Kody, she slowly began to rediscover her own strength. She focused on her wellness, self-care, and mental health, becoming more confident and empowered with each passing day. Her journey wasn't easy, though. The trauma of her past still lingered, but Mary's willingness to confront her insecurities and invest in herself became a true testament to her resilience. As she ventured into the world of online dating and building a life outside of Kody's shadow, Mary found herself confronting her past demons head-on. She wasn't just trying to heal from her emotional scars. She was actively reshaping her life, turning it into something she could be proud of. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. Her physical transformation, her renewed focus on her own happiness, and her willingness to embrace her newfound independence were all signs of the woman Mary was becoming. She wasn't just a wife or a mother anymore. She was Mary. She was forging her own path, and as painful as it was empowering. But while Mary was blossoming in her independence, Janelle's story was filled with grief and emotional turmoil. When Garrison passed away, Janelle was thrown into an emotional storm that she couldn't ignore. Garrison was not only her son, but he was also a central part of her emotional world. Her grief was profound, and it wasn't just about losing a child. It was about losing a connection that had been deeply strained by the way the family dynamics had shifted over the years. In the aftermath of Garrison's death, Janelle found herself torn between her grief and the fractured relationship with Kody. Unlike Mary, who had already left Kody emotionally long before their physical separation, Janelle was still very much involved in the family. However, the emotional strain was beginning to take its toll. Kody, for all his attempts at reconciliation with his older children, wasn't there in the way that Janelle needed him to be. His lack of emotional availability, particularly after Garrison's death, seemed to amplify Janelle's feelings of loneliness and abandonment. The more Janelle wrestled with her grief, the more she started to question her place in the family. Was staying with Kody, who seemed emotionally distant, worth the toll it was taking on her mental health? Was it time for her to focus on herself and her children, to build a life outside of Kody's shadow? These questions weighed heavily on her, and in some ways, they seemed to set her on a path of self-discovery similar to Mary's. Janelle had always been incredibly independent, and the thought of leaving the family, leaving Kody, became more and more appealing as the emotional neglect piled on. Janelle began to focus on her agricultural business, prioritizing her own happiness and the well-being of her children. Her focus on her kids and her growing sense of independence hinted that she was moving toward a future without Kody, one where she could find peace, autonomy, and fulfillment. The idea of leaving Kody, though not an easy decision, felt more and more like the only option for Janelle. The emotional distance between them had become too much to ignore, and the grief over Garrison's death only served to underline how fractured their relationship had truly become. In the end, Janelle's story wasn't just about grief. It was about reclaiming her independence and rebuilding her life on her own terms. As Mary embraced her transformation, Janelle seemed to be standing on the edge of a similar rebirth, one where she would finally prioritize her own needs and find her own peace. It was a journey of self-discovery for both women, but their paths were shaped by different kinds of emotional pain. Yet, in many ways, they were both reclaiming their own narratives, moving toward a life where they could thrive, separate from the toxic dynamics that had held them back for so long. At the heart of all the dysfunction and heartache within the Brown family lies a painful, almost tragic truth. So many relationships were never fully realized because of unspoken words, unresolved conflict, and missed opportunities. It's like watching a series of unfortunate moments pile up one after the other, leaving behind nothing but regret and a deep sense of loss. Kody's family, once so close-knit, is now deeply fragmented, each member holding on to their own pain and regret over the years they've spent not communicating, not healing, and not connecting. This theme runs through every one of the Browns' emotional arcs. Take Kody's relationship with his children, for example. His relationships with his kids, particularly the ones from his earlier marriages, have been a series of breakdowns that didn't need to happen. His favoritism toward his children with Robin wasn't just a preference. It was a wedge that drove a permanent division in the family. And when you couple that with Kody's own emotional neglect, the cracks in those relationships deepened, often irreparably. The most tragic part? Some of these rifts weren't insurmountable. Had Kody simply put in the effort, had he reached out when his children needed him most, maybe things could have been different. But Kody's failure to recognize or admit the damage he was doing, especially during the pandemic when things were already strained, led to relationships that are now beyond the point of repair. And let's not forget the time he spent emotionally withdrawing from his older children, Garrison's death hitting so hard because for so many years, there was so much unspoken between father and son. A relationship cut short, leaving nothing but regret and missed moments. This unspoken pain also rings true for his wives. Mary and Janelle, for instance, both spent so many years dealing with emotional neglect without ever truly expressing how much it hurt. There were moments where Kody could have opened up, asked for forgiveness, or worked harder to make the women feel loved and validated. But those moments passed, and the damage continued to build, creating emotional scars that are incredibly difficult to heal. And then there's the idea of reconciliation, especially with the children. Kody's efforts to reach out and rebuild those bonds came too late, like trying to fix a broken vase with only a few fragments left. It was clear by then that those relationships were too fractured. The emotional distance that had built up over the years couldn't be undone with a few conversations or half-hearted attempts to make things right. The true tragedy here is that these missed opportunities aren't just about missed moments with family. They're about missed chances to heal, to grow, and to build something better. When Kody looks back on it, can he truly say he did everything he could to repair the damage? Or will the regret over missed words? Unresolved feelings and broken connections haunt him forever. It's a question that lingers, and it's one that may never have a clear answer, because sometimes you can't undo the harm that's already been done. As if the emotional toll within the Brown family wasn't enough, the public's perception has only added another layer of complexity to this already tense situation. Kody, Meri, Janelle, and the rest of the family haven't just had to grapple with their own personal struggles. They've had to do it under the harsh and unforgiving spotlight of reality television. From their every move being scrutinized to the constant flood of social media commentary, it's clear that the Browns are living in a world where privacy is a luxury they simply don't have. And that has impacted them in ways you wouldn't believe. Kody, in particular, has come under fire time and time again for his relationship choices, his treatment of his wives, and his parenting decisions. But it's not just about the family drama anymore. The public sees Kody's flaws, his favoritism, his emotional neglect, and quite frankly, they aren't shy about calling him out. His image has been tarnished, and while reality TV is supposed to be entertaining, the emotional damage caused by that public judgment has likely weighed heavily on Kody. But then there's Meri, who, despite everything, has had the hardest time breaking free from the scrutiny. After years of emotional neglect, failed attempts to rebuild her marriage with Kody, and her eventual divorce, Meri became a central figure in the narrative surrounding the Brown family. The public's harsh opinions of her, particularly when it came to her relationship with Kody and her involvement with the catfishing scandal, have made it nearly impossible for her to find peace. There's something inherently cruel about the way fans and outsiders have treated Meri's journey, many seeing her as the one who stayed too long, the one who put up with too much, and the one who, in their eyes, was somehow weak for not leaving sooner. What's been hard to watch, though, is how this external judgment has colored Meri's self-worth. It's like the more the public scrutinizes her, the more she internalizes those feelings of inadequacy. You can see her struggling to prove herself to the world, to reclaim her confidence and rebuild her identity. But no matter what she does, whether it's through her social media posts, her dating experiences, or her attempts to find happiness outside of Kody, there's always that looming judgment hanging over her. And then there's Janelle, who, like Meri, has been grappling with the challenge of trying to heal publicly. After Garrison's tragic death and her subsequent emotional turmoil, the public wasn't kind. People often assume they know what's best for her, telling her how she should react, how she should grieve, and how she should navigate her broken marriage with Kody. But what's lost in all of that is her internal struggle, her personal journey of self-discovery and growth. It's easy for outsiders to judge her, but no one truly understands the depths of her grief, her love for her children, and the emotional toll that losing her son took on her. As Kody, Meri, and Janelle try to rebuild their lives, the biggest question remains: can they overcome the public's judgment and rebuild trust, both with each other and with the world watching? Rebuilding trust in the family in the midst of such intense public scrutiny seems almost impossible. Years of emotional neglect, favoritism, and hurt feelings can't be undone with a few nice social media posts or apologies. Trust is built over time, with real effort, with honesty, and most importantly, with vulnerability. But when the world is constantly watching and commenting on every decision you make, it's hard to feel safe enough to open up. Kody, in particular, has a long road ahead of him if he's going to rebuild his relationship with his wives, his children, and yes, even his fans. The challenge of rebuilding trust is further complicated by the fact that many of the Brown struggles, particularly those regarding Kody's emotional neglect and favoritism, have been aired out for all to see. And no matter how hard they try to heal, there's always going to be that lingering shadow of public perception. Can they rise above it? Can they overcome the years of hurt? The road to healing is long, and with the world watching, it's not just about fixing relationships within the family. It's about reclaiming their personal dignity in the face of all that judgment. The emotional toll of years of neglect, regret, and fractured relationships is undeniable. The Brown family's journey has been marked by deep pain, but also by moments of personal growth and self-realization. Kody's emotional disconnect, His children's loss and the wife's struggles have created an intricate web of regret that's difficult to untangle. Yet, amid all the heartache, there's a glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, reconciliation is still possible. But the real question remains, can these broken bonds truly be mended? Can Kody repair his relationships with his children? And can the wives find peace both within themselves and with each other? As we reflect on the themes of loss, regret, and the search for healing, we're reminded that healing isn't always about fixing the past. It's about learning to live with it and moving forward. The Browns are still in the process of finding that balance. What do you think? Can the Browns heal and rebuild, or is the damage too great? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this emotional journey. Until next time, take care.